There's a couple of things that I would like to say before the meeting gets started from an agenda perspective. First of all, I would like to thank Tom Kilalea for his baker's dozens plus worth of years on the Ways and Means Committee. He always brought a distinctive style and a distinctive voice, and his presence will be missed. Okay.
You're not muted.
So I would really like to thank all the contributions he made to the town of Burlington and wish him the best going forward, and definitely with his health. I know he's had some challenges and he's been getting better, but thank you very much, Tom. And with that, I would like to I'd like to welcome our newest member of the committee, Megan I knew I would. Navoychek.
That's right. Thank you.
She'll be joining Town Hall 2 under Brad's fine direction, and so she joins us tonight.
So she gets to start with, 30 more subcommittee meetings?
You said 15, so don't scare her. So, welcome.
Thank you.
And then tonight, we're not going to, even though it's on the agenda, we're not going to review the rec department's budgets. Unfortunately, Brendan Egan had an emergency and he needed to take care of that, so we will schedule that at a future meeting. And with that, we will turn to the Board of Health.
Or reorder.
Yeah, we're going to have a seat.
And
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening. My name's Susan Luminello. I'm Director of Public Health for the Board of Health.
Thanks. So John and I reviewed that budget yesterday, and John will give the report.
okay. Yeah, we had a good meeting with the Board of Health and the Department of Public Health. First off, I'd like to welcome Mike Green, our new Associate Director of Public Health, who's not here tonight, unfortunately, but great to have him on board. That's a slot that we approved and was filled in December. So there's currently no open positions in the department, which is great. Look, this is budget, where'd it go?
510.
510, thank you. So you'll see that overall, the operating budget is a 1.5% decrease, which is kind of nice. The salary increases are due to the usual step increases, and as with basically all the budgets, the contracts are being negotiated, so that would be on top of this increase, and that money will come out of negotiated settlements. The part-time salary line item may stand out as, since it's a large decrease, and that's due to two reasons. The most significant part of that is that the position is now being filled with someone at a lower step level than it was in the previous year, which lowered it quite a bit. And then additionally, in the previous year, it was accidentally budgeted at 35 hours, even though it's 30. So that's been corrected also, which lowered the budget on that. Another salary-related item is that there is, you'll note that there's an admin position being funded via a grant, which is something we always like to look at because we worry your grant goes away and then the person doesn't. But the good news is that this one is a grant from the Regional Emergency Preparedness group, and the admin, half the admin's time is being used for that group. So they have a real stake in wanting to continue the grant so that they keep getting that administrative help. And as a bonus, we get to use half that person's time for our department's work. So it's a win for everyone. In general, the department feels it's well-positioned for the expected growth in the life sciences area now. So they're feeling good about the staffing as far as that goes. And the other thing I'll throw out there, because I ask every year, CPO stands for Certified Pool Operator. So if you're looking at that line item, that's what that's all about. It's basically a union mandated or union negotiated additional stipend of, as I recall, a fairly nominal amount for people that are certified pool operators, which means they're authorized to basically evaluate the pools and make sure they're being operated properly. They're not the lifeguard.
That would be an extra stipend.
Exactly, that would be another bonus. So that's the salary end of things. On the expense side, it's level funded, and the expenses seem as reasonable as they did last year, so we didn't spend a lot of time on that discussion. We did note that there's a home health line that is $0, and that will go away so that we don't have to keep wondering why we have a $0 line item. So you'll see that down in special accounts. Also, under special accounts is the medical reserve corps, which is included in the operating budget, and that, again, is level funded at $1,000. So that brings us to the operating budget of $694,894, a 1.5% decrease. The subcommittee voted 2-0 in favor of recommending that budget.
Is that the updated value from the cover sheet?
No, this
Oh,
one's
that's-
okay.
Oh, that's one's okay, right.
You're thinking of planning.
I'm planning on my mind.
Yep.
Thank you. Do you have, would you like to add anything further?
I can add some stuff on the Medical Reserve Corps. Just in the past year, we've gotten a lot of new volunteers, a lot of people wanting to help out with COVID-related activities, and we're working really hard to keep them and find other things for them to do. One of the things for that line item that I feel is important is it covers things that are not included in the grants that we get and the funding that we get from the state and the national program. Things like shirts and certain wearable items or food for refreshments for training, things like that. We use that fund for those types of things for our volunteers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions from the committee? Brad?
So I've met with Susan the past several years, and my apologies that I was not able to make the subcommittee meeting this time around. So in past years, make sure I get the feedback right. In past years, you were asking for some help. I know you were working. I know you worked through COVID. You were working 7 days a week, 12 months out of the year. And now that you have the assistant, could you speak to how the workflow and the amount of work over there is being managed, well, it's more manageable, but if you could speak to whether that's a success or not.
Yeah, so it definitely is more manageable. Part of that is we're no longer in the emergency situation, now that the governor had declared that no longer an emergency situation. That freed us up from having to enforce all of the COVID-related standards that were imposed by the state, which we were responsible for enforcing. So that had taken, during the whole pandemic, a lot of our staff's time, as well as case management and investigation for individual COVID cases. So during the height of the pandemic, when we were in the surges, I had my staff, as well, every staff member, working on COVID case management as well. And we also had our Burlington Volunteer Reserve Corps working on that. We had about 10 to 15 volunteers, mainly nurses and medical volunteers, who came forward and helped us out with case management. So they were really key in that whole response. And at that time, it was important, very important, because people didn't understand, what the requirements were, what isolation and quarantine was, what they needed to do. Now we're beyond that. I think most people now understand, what's required, where to find out the information. So we're not doing as the case management like we were before with regards to COVID. We still have to do communicable disease case management, which we've done all along, but no longer responding to every single COVID case. As well as now that the schools are back to their pre-COVID state, we're no longer communicating with the schools every day and letting them know, which kids need to be on isolation, which on quarantine, and communicating with the school nurses as much. So that has freed up a lot of our time. So we're getting back to more of our normal operations. We're looking at our hazardous material inspections, which we had to put off a lot of them during COVID because we just weren't able to do them. So now we're back to those. We've been, for several months now, we've been back to our food inspections, our regular food inspections, and we have our 2 inspectors doing those, and we're back on track with those. Now we're looking to get back on track with our hazardous materials inspections, and now that more people are opening, there's more of that regular work to do. So we still have COVID-related activities going on, but not like anything we had in the past. We're also, one of the things that our new associate health director is working on is the biological safety permits. So as you may recall, about a year right before COVID, we had enacted the biological safety regulations, and with that was the expectation that Burlington would be seeing a lot more of these types of businesses, and that is starting to ramp up now. So we're starting to see more businesses coming in, more applications coming in. Each one of those that come in with our regulations requires a full review from us, as well as sitting on the IBC committee for each company. That's a member of the Board of Health staff, which require that is also an inspection. And then we have community members who are IBC representatives. So one of the things that we've done now, gearing up for that, is did a outreach to the community and to our volunteers to see if anybody wanted to be a part of that. So we have a really good list right now of about 10 to 15 people who are interested in being a part of that. And right now we're working on assigning individuals to individual companies to sit on these IBCs.
Thank you. And just a follow-up comment. So one of the issues with that this committee discussed in terms of bumping up your head count is we understood with COVID that there was a greater need, but from what you're telling us now, there's that continued backlog and now a ramping up in responsibilities. So there is plenty of work for all of you plus the new person.
Yes.
And, yeah. So that's glad you got the extra staffing to help with that.
Thank you. Thank you all for that.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned hazardous materials, hazardous waste. Could you just give some examples of what that would be and where it would be?
So there is a bylaw, it's called the Control of Toxic and Hazardous Materials Bylaw, that was enacted many, many years ago, way before my time. But it requires that any company is storing a certain amount of chemicals register with the Board of Health on a yearly basis. And, we do an inspection once we get their registration. And we look at things like secondary containment. Do they have the proper secondary containment? Do they have all their floor drains closed? How are they storing their chemicals? Are they storing incompatible chemicals next to each other? So certain things, do they have underground storage tanks? Have they been tank tested? Are their outside storage tanks covered? Things like that is what we look at during the inspections. So we enforce that bylaw, and the hazardous material inspections are part of that. We have about, right now, I think registered over 200 companies.
Would it include like medical
They
hazardous
include
materials?
gas stations, they include laboratories, medical offices, any place that's storing chemicals. should be registered with us. We have a list that's been ongoing for many years. We mainly get the names as businesses come into town and go through the planning process. We'll flag that and say they have to come to us and fill out the registration form. So that's kind of how we identify them right now. And if we know of a business that we know we're storing chemicals, we'll reach out to them and say, hey, you need to register with us.
Okay, thank you.
Have something, Roger, or no? Seeing no further questions, the chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Frank? Aye. Brad?
Yes?
Megan?
Aye.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris? Was that a yes? Okay,
So
thanks.
his lips move.
Ed Parsons?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, so that's 11-0. So do we move now on to mosquito control?
Okay, so the department has actually two accommodated accounts. There's mosquito control and hazardous waste, and they are both level funded this year. So looking at hazardous waste, it's been level funded for several years actually, and it was noted that in the last year with the pandemic, apparently people are cleaning out their houses and bringing in a lot more stuff than they used to be. But the good news is if you look at the amount spent relative to budget, there's still a good amount left. There's a hazardous waste day coming up at the beginning of April, a little advertisement there. So it looks like the account should be okay for this year still. And seems appropriate for future years. With mosquito control, this is a contracted service. It's done through a regional group, and the question I always have is how do you know it's actually working? But the good news is they actually have a way of figuring that out. They trap mosquitoes, and through the traps they can see if there's an increase in population or decrease and where they might need to spray based on that, and also checking for things like EEE to see if that's an issue in the captured population. One of the things the Board of Health noted is that they're looking into whether there's ill effects with the local beekeepers, so to make sure that there's no issues going on there. And something I didn't realize is that if someone wishes to opt out of spraying, that's something that they can do. So the two accommodated accounts total $95,743 for a 0% increase, and the subcommittee voted 2-0 to recommend this budget.
Care to add any additional comments on either budget?
The East Middlesex Mosquito Control, just for your information, we had a little bit of a discussion about, what is that? That's a state organization that there's a legislation that requires these mosquito control agencies to be present in the state, and they cover different areas. So that's something that is being looked at right now on the state level. So a task force has been formed to look at mosquito control in the state, because this legislation is very old, and people like beekeepers and others have said, we want more information on this. What are they doing? How is it being run? How are they doing aerial spraying? Things like that. So the task force is currently meeting. They're having listening sessions. That's something that we're looking at very closely in the event that there could be changes to mosquito control in Massachusetts coming up in the next few years, dependent upon what the task force finds out or uncovers during their talks.
It seems like traditionally we've done it that way.
And Household Hazardous Waste Day is Saturday, April 2nd.
Question.
Oh, I'm sorry, is it, yeah, the 2nd. That's, the election day is the 9th, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Second. Questions?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve.
Second?
So we're going to do the mosquito budget first?
Were you doing them collectively? You gave us a number and a total, or do you need two separate votes?
I can entertain a motion to take them both together if no one objects.
Oh, let's do that. I'll move that.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so this will be a combined vote for both mosquito and control and hazardous waste. Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris? Yes. Head?
Yes.
Rob, Jaya?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, 11-0.
So can I observe that the way that this was done, the line item for MRC was not voted?
Actually, the MRC is a special account, but it's included in the operating budget. So when you voted on the operating budget, you
All right,
voted
so
for
like
it.
the third year in a row, I'll say that the way this is organized is really confusing.
I agree.
We will make a note and see if we can get it for the next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Okay, so we'll go to planning. That's John.
Sitting in for Brad again on this, since it was the same day. Planning is number 175. And I'll apologize that the chair pointed out a discrepancy that I failed to resolve during the meeting. So as a result, you're all penalized by getting a follow-up email earlier today. That's a spreadsheet that has the actual budget, which is remarkably similar to the previous one, but it's good to work with the right one. So you want to use that spreadsheet, and I'll explain the differences just in case you carefully reviewed the first one and were wondering what happened. All right, so the
Thank you, Richard.
So in this case, the planning department's budget is 90%, over 90% salary, and that's where we spent the bulk of our time on discussion. And in terms of the continuing positions, the usual step increases are in there, and again, the negotiated increase hasn't been negotiated yet. So that will come out of negotiated settlements when if that occurs. So the lion's share of the salary increase is due to, well, largely due to one new position, but there are two new positions proposed here, and the chair forwarded on the job descriptions and Mike's most excellent form that applies to those. And those are in the website also. The first new position is the zoning compliance officer position. And the intent of this position is that they'd be verifying compliance with development approval conditions, and as well as continued compliance with the bylaws for everyone. And this includes our many PDDs in addition to ones falling under the regular zoning bylaws. So obviously, there's going to be a lot of coordination while the officer's reporting to the planning department. There's a lot of coordination with the building department, since there's obviously a lot of overlap in terms of responsibilities and concerns there. And it should be noted, I think, I've heard concern that the planning board's trying to get their own police officer and go around and be heavy-handed. And I think the point of this officer is not to be that, and is to focus on identifying issues and cooperatively resolving them with the responsible party. And in particular, this officer can't levy fines themselves. If there's a situation that did rise to that level, it would be referred to the building inspector to deal with that. So we're not trying to create a revenue center here. We're not trying to create more trouble, but the director highlighted that because of a lack of staffing, it's very difficult to enforce the development compliance and compliance with zoning bylaws. So as a result, in general, only the most egregious situations have, as Ms. Kassner mentioned, if it's life or death, we'll catch it, but things that are significant, but maybe not quite that serious, they don't have enough time to properly enforce those. So this would address that shortcoming. I should note that the administration is, as I understand it, was leaning towards wanting this to be tried out as a 20-hour position and see how it goes, and then take it from there. I think both the director and the Ways and Means Subcommittee agreed that the kind of applicants you're going to get for a 20-hour position are probably different than the kind you would get for a full-time position. So it's really hard to do a try before you buy strategy here, with the assumption that you could just magically, turn them into a full-time person if you liked how it was going. And it seems like it may be difficult to hire someone for that part-time position. So we were in agreement that as it's budgeted here, which is for a full-time person, that made sense to us also. And I think there was a general understanding that this is the kind of position that there's plenty of work to do, and so there may be a few other items that flesh this job out. If it ends up being a 30-hour-a-week job, there's plenty of other things to do to fill out that spare time that they won't go wanting for things to do. So again, the budget reflects the full-time hire here. So just in terms of the incorrect initial thing that you have in your paper books and is on the website right now, the original, in your books, I think it's budgeted as step 10, and now is corrected to be step 11. And so you'll see that the actual amount is about 5,000 more for this position on the spreadsheet that Steve forwarded to you earlier today. Now, to make it a little more confusing, the summary page, in fact, had the correct amount in the total. So in terms of the total, it doesn't change that, but the detail pages have been corrected. The second position is for the planning assistant position. In terms of dollars, this is about, so there's a swap going on here. The intent is to take the current admin assistant 1 position, basically leave that vacant and replace it with the planning assistant position. In practice, the hope is that that position will be filled by that same person, because it turns out they're uniquely qualified to fill this position, having basically doing all the work already. So in many ways, this is a title change that is recognizing the fact that significantly more work than the admin assistant 1 position is being done. I think operationally it will need to be advertised and interviewed, but the person currently doing the work obviously will have a bit of an advantage in that process, since they're very familiar with it. So that also explains why in the budget it's budgeted as starting at step 10 rather than step 1 so that in the event it is filled by this person, that they don't have to accept a pay decrease in order to get the higher job title. This is slated to be an A&P job as opposed to a union job. And so that's a potential variation that may occur if negotiations don't work out the way we anticipate. Because everything's a negotiation. In terms of expenses, let me just double check here. They are level funded. I'm sorry, I need to correct that slightly. Through Steve's intense negotiation, the $1,006 mileage item was reduced to $1,000. So we got a little savings there. But at any rate, so the total of expenses and salaries ends up being $444,220. And just for reference, that is $6 less than what the original summary page said. So if you're just looking at the summary page, there's not a big surprise here. If you're looking at the detail page, you will see that detail on the zoning compliance officer being corrected. So I mistakenly had the subcommittee vote on the detail pages, assuming they were correct. So the subcommittee did recommend that at 300. But I'll highlight that the actual budget is about 5,000 more than what we voted on. But given that we conceptually agreed to the positions and the various expenses, I'll go on a limb and suggest that we would likely have approved the corrected detail pages.
Thanks, John. Hi.
Hi,
Hey, Kristen.
welcome, all of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Here in this room, although those of you on the screen can't see me, but
So
you can hear me.
Please introduce yourself and add additional context.
Sure, Kristen Kassner, Planning Director, happy to be here. I do want to just first thank you, all of you, and the rest of town meeting. I think we've been a team, we've been on this kind of this bus moving forward for a couple of years, doing a lot of things to keep us up to date, relevant on the map. And with that, there's been a lot of really embracing coordinated development services. I mean, we've had, planning and selectmen and Board of Health, and we've done a pretty good job kind of parallel working together, but really looking at this picture of what we've accomplished over the past 5 years and what we're seeing and moving forward, and the energy that's coming to Burlington and the market that's coming to Burlington is fantastic. I mean, we're seeing what we saw, as Sun Microsystems and Oracle came in the 90s, and this is exactly what we wanted. We didn't even, it's great. It's great that we're here. And I commend last year, I think, the hire of Mike Green and the Board of Health has been fantastic in terms of, really positioning the biological safety permits and everything that life science entails and the oversight there, and the work that they've done to update their regulations. And I think just overall the message, and then working with Melissa as she's really creating the Economic Development Office and how that all works together. We're, as a town, all of us wear like 7 hats, and we all do 50 things at one time and just prioritize the top 10, and that's just how we work, and that's how I've worked for almost 20 years that I've been here, which is great, but at a certain point when you have such a complex amount of development coming in, you just really, I think you guys have done a great job of bringing in the professional staff and the professionalism needed to manage that. And this piece here, and actually over the last couple of years, I think all of us have taken a hard look at what do we need in our departments to be successful and not be completely burned out, and especially through COVID where everything was hard, but we kept going. And I think, to all the departments, we kept going, and it was great. And I think we did everything as best as we could. But we're really, really, really busy. And it's not we're really busy because it's just this one single trend. I mean, between Boston being the epicenter of life science, we're on the map every single day. We're getting calls for, office that wants to retrofit into lab space, retail that wants to retrofit into lab space, which is like, what? So I think, to prepare ourselves well, and I think we've been doing a good job. There's a lot of things that we do well, there's things we don't do well, and we just want to recognize that, as well as recognize the jobs that we're doing currently and the people in them that are going over and above what they really need to do in their job description. And so that absolutely comes into play with the planning assistant position, where right now it's categorized as an admin 1 position, which is under an admin 2. So while the single clerk departments do all of the admin work, it's only part of the full admin 2, just because we don't have a second person. So what we have as an admin does everything admin, does all the finances for the department, manages all the sureties and bonds, does all the legal notices for us, does all the zoning determinations for us, and and those include a lot of planning specific work that if they weren't doing, essentially our planning staff would need to be doing. So we want to make sure we're recognizing all of the tasks and allocate them as they should be allocated, to make sure we're all freed up for what we can do and what we should be doing to move things forward. I mean, we have things come in the door, there's timelines, we need to get them out the door, and then they're out the door and 10 more things come in. And that piece is where we get into the zoning enforcement, which honestly, as I've had a couple conversations with Mark Dupel in the building department, as well as my staff, and you guys, some of you guys in the subcommittee, and I think the better name for it is probably development coordinator, to manage the post-development approval process. It's absolutely not a clipboard and a badge and throw the hammer down and say, you didn't do this right and I'm gonna fine you. I mean, that's the last thing we wanna do. I mean, we're very much coordinated, try to figure out how can we help development move smoothly through the process. How do we not aggravate neighbors if there happens to be an issue? How do we make sure communication is clear with all the departments, all the development teams, and the residents. So anyway, so that piece is really the piece that we are identifying of not doing very well. And the building department is also, I mean, everything that comes through us is going to them, and it's all wonderful, and we're building a lot of value in this community. But we also, at the same time, want to make sure that development doesn't start to not have the oversight that it's needed to kind of get people worried at too much development or this or that, or this is happening. And we want to make sure that we're holding people to the conditions that we've approved them at. That if you said we agreed and everything's a negotiation, that we go through the planning board process, which all of you know is not necessarily an easy process, and there's a lot of late nights, and there's 20-page decisions. So to hold people to making sure that we're meeting all obligations. I will say that through COVID, project management on the private side has not been awesome. So there's been a lot more of our time spent on overseeing what used to be overseen by more on the other side. We're not shy about telling people that. And I think there's definitely teams that have done a much better job over the last couple of months. But we feel that we can't just assume the building department, which is technically the zoning enforcement office, that's their authorities. They are the ones that would issue fines, issue letters. We're not at all suggesting that we're taking that power away from them, but we want to really try not to get there. We want a process and a person that will help us have that oversight and comply with everything that's supposed to be done. I will say, way back in the day, we used to have a development inspection person that we used to share with engineering. And that, as things shifted, as Tom Hickey came over here as assistant town administrator, and that department got shuffled around, that was lost. And at the time, it was probably 12, maybe more than 12 years ago. Just things start to suffer, and that's why I'm saying we're not doing things as well as we used to do, and things are a lot more complex, there's a lot more going on. And I think there's just some sensitivity that we need to respect and make sure that we're doing the job we're telling the residents as they come to the board and we negotiate these conditions, and that, you know, we're here to oversee all these things. So that's why we're here. That's why we're looking to reclassify this one position and add a second position, which our total budget then is increasing by a little over $70,000. And we hope you support it, and I'm happy here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Roger had his hand up first.
Well, I figured out a couple of my misunderstandings, because the printed copy is missing the total columns. Anyway, and I think you covered some of my questions around the authority of this zoning enforcement officer. The title name has a fairly strong implication to it, and I was gonna ask, you know, where in the zoning or the codes, or, you know, does that title show up in any of the I guess, legislation that gives the authority to the town? You mentioned that the building department actually has the authority. And
It's
I'm sure
too
the
cl-
title has
yeah.
been discussed at length to get here.
It's too close to that in legislation that give the building department authority. So I do feel that very much so that we need to change the name before we get to town meeting.
Okay, that was my concern, was that.
To a development coordinator,
Okay.
something like, or to development management
All right, I think with just,
manager.
obviously my comments, with that title, it seems like you need to be clear where the authority comes from.
Yes, I totally agree.
Right.
It's an iterative process, we're here, so hopefully
Yep.
it's the best by the time we get to town meeting.
I think that's it for now, thanks.
Brad?
Thank you. Again, we've, the planning board, this is not a new request. What you guys, while you've not made the request, you've let us know for however many years that you've been thinking about it and that there's a growing need. And so when I think over the history of the request, it's like, okay, well, why now? And I think you just answered it, and we've been hearing that from Susan, and in fact, Town Hall 1 talking about the reorganization, that things are growing, things are moving, and I've had a philosophy with town government for years that we should either do something, if there's a department or a need or whatever, we should either do it or not do it. We shouldn't do it poorly. And so if we're going to, planning is crucial to the economic health of the community, and I think you've made your case, and I will support the addition to your budget. Thank you.
Sonia?
Okay, so I have to ask this question. Kristen, forgive me, because you know what I think of what the planning department does, but what this committee didn't see is the conversation that Doug and I had with Recreation, which was, you know, about adding a head count when we very specifically talked last week about head counts, and my justification for the town accountant was we were swapping one FTE with another FTE. So this is a struggle for me because we literally just said it to Recreation. You don't know our vote, but you will in a week, and, you know, we literally had to ask that question, like, you know, how long can you go without something? And I don't want to get into Rec's budget right now, of course, but I am struggling with it, because what I told Recreation was very clear. If I can help a department and it's not changing the FTE, and that's what Ways and Means has been talking about, then we didn't take issue with it. But in a particular instance where we're adding an FTE, I struggle with adding the planning assistant. I'm assuming that's 1-for-1, right? So there's no change in that. The zoning compliance, which I agree, if this goes forward, absolutely needs to change, because it sounds like it's a building enforcement. So I'm with you on that one, and I think that's great. And I just need to know, do you think, was the administration talking 20 hours for that reason, of trying it out, adding in some extra help? Is there something that you can share it with another department? And again, Kristen, I know what kind of work you guys are doing there, but it was literally a struggle for us to have that meeting with Rec just a few days ago. So my justification of saying it to them and then coming in and not saying it here, their numbers are going up in Recreation, so on and so forth. So when I look at it on a planning side, I see the same dilemma for us. And if Doug were here, I know the chairman knows this, we were going to ask to talk about, when does Burlington stop talking about FTEs and talking about, are we level servicing? Are we doing what we're supposed to do for the community? And if we are going to be looking at it on a case-by-case basis like this, then quite frankly, I need to go back to rec and have another conversation, because this is where the struggle becomes. We're not looking to pit department against department here and say who gets one and who doesn't get one. And if I'm going on the philosophy of what I said to rec, then I have to stick on that philosophy for planning. And my question to you, Kristen, is there a way to find, was the administration's discussion with you, the testing of the position, for lack of a better term, was that to keep the head count down, to see if in fact, we're not questioning if the workload's there, but other departments have similar workloads. So I'm stuck in this spot where I think the committee understands what I'm saying. We just had this long conversation. Is the community saying we're level funding, and, I'm sorry, not level funding, we're leveling services, or are we meeting the demands of the community? Because if we're meeting the demands of a community, then all due respect, we gotta let go of this idea of FTE counts. Which one are we doing? And, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Because that's gonna affect how I'm voting, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I don't question planning, and I don't question the value of what life sciences is doing, and I don't question that it brings in things, but we can make an argument for every department. So I wanna be sure that I'm very clear and consistent with the message we're delivering.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's from that perspective, it's a tough situation, because you see the at least from the planning perspective, you see the workload and the work that they're doing to enhance the community. But on the flip side, if we are trying to keep the head count at where it is and keep the budgets within the guidelines, then it is a tough decision. Mike and then Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the position that's the planning assistant position, that is the swap with the administrative assistant one position, correct?
It is.
So does that administrative assistant one position go away? Like, you're not gonna, what I'm concerned about is 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we're gonna say, well, we had this
Yep.
administrative one position, but we moved that out and we wanna fill that now.
I completely understand, and that is not my intention. Honestly, I have not been through a union process since I only have one union employee, and with that unknown, it was just kind of I wanted to keep it in there to figure out what the outcome there might be. In terms of having this discussion with town meeting as a whole, I'm happy to kind of try to figure out a better way to present it. But the intention is to have that position have that work be done by the planning assistant position. So I'm not coming back to say I need another admin one position. What I do need is a development coordinator position. And I will note, and I completely appreciate, and knew coming in, like I said, well, if they support planning, they still have to ask me this question, because we have, in planning, since 1993, when we added the assistant planner, in 2010, we added the senior planner. So we've added 2 positions pretty much since the planning department has kind of existed, like as a modern planning department. So, I think that is a factor that I would ask to take into consideration. The second, in working back and forth with the building department, where should this sit? We talked a little about that. I will say, it was like, well, the building department has a lot of budget they're not using this year. But it was more appropriate to have it sit in the planning department. I totally understand adding FTEs is a big question. The administration did support it at 20 hours. If we can see how it works, my main objection, I'm fine with that, other than my main objection is it's just really hard to hire a 20-hour position and get any candidates that can actually, I don't know, I'm just worried about hiring at 20 hours. And I also mentioned that, as I've talked about coordinated development services, I'm happy if other departments, as this position develops, need a little bit more oversight, especially post-development, to work with conservation or Board of Health, if, they're out in the field, can they look at something else, or, but obviously, we need to be training professional staff to know what they're doing. But in terms of trying to figure out, if there's additional help we can provide, we always do that. I mean, we'll provide the support to anyone we can, if we have the bandwidth. So, I appreciate the question. I know FTE questions are hard. We have been really conservative with any position ad over a lot of years. And I think that we've shown that we can create a lot of value. And the last thing in the community with the energies that, we have to work with you, building public consensus and moving things forward through town meeting. The thing that I worry about is if you go through the history of Burlington and when things when we kind of stopped doing kind of public outreach, public consensus, and when building when a lot of things started to happen, as you get this in like the late 80s, and there was a really big backlash in the early 90s, and you had a lot of bylaw changes we're still looking at that were, how do we stop this? Because there was kind of a losing faith in, this is all happening, who's looking out for us? And, because you guys as residents are the ones that are setting all the goals for the community. We want to make sure that we're presenting an atmosphere that are meeting those goals, and we're overseeing what's happening so that we're not running into any situation where negative things might be happening. I mean, certain things we can't control, but there's a lot we can. But if we don't have if we're not looking out for that, or don't have the staff to, because we have too much coming in the door, it's just hard. And it's hard to, I don't know, change kind of the culture as it starts to move. And between 88 and 92, there was if you go back in time, it's an interesting history that happened there. And anyway, I don't have the full story of exactly how it got there, but some of you might. But I don't know. Keep the faith. Let's all do this together, and let's all be successful. Is kind of where I'm at.
So,
Mike
yeah,
has a
one more question. It's question/comment.
Sure.
One of the things we were trying to get at, and you did a nice job filling out the form, and I realized that the new position request form needs to be tweaked a little bit, because one of the most important pieces is the justification for the position. And as I'm looking at it, people seem to just highlight one line. And what we're really looking for was a lot of data behind why you need this position, because I would like to see in black and white numbers and justifications for that. So, saying, we've got a ton of work coming in, I don't know what to make of that. That doesn't, but I would rather see, we've been looking at this position for a couple of years now. Brad said it's been requested for a couple of years, so that's a long time to have started to say to myself, okay, let's start really documenting why we need this position, because, X number of such and such has happened, or certain hours, or this or that. Like it should be something that can be stated kind of quantitatively why there's a need for this position at this point in time. And that's part of what I don't see, and I think it's because the form doesn't ask for it explicitly enough, but I feel that that's probably the most important part of a request for a new position, is really laying out for us why it's needed, and not kind of ad hoc, kind of war story reasoning, but, just more statistics, I guess, more data.
Roger and then Brad, sorry.
Just a quick observation. So the new positions that we've seen don't exceed the guideline. So in net, we're at the guideline. This means that the administration and the departments have made priority choices. They've traded things off. I don't know whether it's people versus people or people versus materials. But it's not like they're asking for something over the guideline, which would be a much bigger deal. It's still a big deal, right?
Right.
Because these, every FTE is basically, we pay them, not forever, but a long time. So,
Well,
Someone else
they
comes
become-
in.
with OPEB, it could
else
be
comes in.
forever, but that's a different story.
well, there is a lifespan.
Right.
There are actuarials. So I think the point is that this is a choice that's been made between different departments, and the administration has helped level this out. I'm not sure that means, I mean, it certainly doesn't mean we should just accept it, but it does fit within guideline and the priorities. And this is gonna seem like a completely irrelevant question, but it seemed like this individual, for the work that they're doing, it seemed like they would need a vehicle. And I don't think that showed up in anywhere, and maybe there's enough vehicles to go around. I know there's a pool and et cetera, but.
Sure, let me answer or comment on your first observation. So, here tonight, you have all the departments that are not under administration and all have their work for their own boards. So we don't really have the opportunity to trade or reposition or have one position. We can't work with other departments because we're only we're under planning, so, I mean, if that opportunity is there, we certainly would have that conversation, but we don't have that opportunity before we come to you to do that, so you'll always see kind of us alone.
And I think that's an
Similar to
oversight
the
on
Board of
our
Health.
part, because I think if those two departments, which don't report into town, had a
Right.
voice at that meeting.
Right, I should have acknowledged that there are several independent boards and commissions that do their own staffing and their own
Yeah,
hiring.
just in terms of the uniqueness, that if we could have been there, we could have worked it out, I would have loved to come in with a more level funded or
Right, but
within
even-
guidelines, but,
But even recognizing that we do have different independent boards that set some of their own criteria,
Yeah.
the total has still come in at the guideline. And that's
Yeah.
partially because maybe it's just informal cooperation between the administration and the staff and the other departments. So anyway, we can
Yeah.
move on. There are other people with questions and.
yeah. The second question, so, I haven't done enough investigation, there used to be, a couple vehicles for town hall that you'd call up Jeannie, who now Jeannie's not here, but you'd call up Jeannie and you get a vehicle, and you'd take it out for the day. We don't have a department vehicle, we kind of just use our own cars because it's faster and easier. We probably shouldn't, especially when we're going to construction sites, but we do. At this point, I'm not asking for a vehicle. If there's still kind of the sharing system going on, we can coordinate that. Sometimes we jump in the car with other departments.
Thanks. I know we went through this with the building department where they didn't have a vehicle either for a while and they were using private cars. And eventually they got their own car.
Yeah, I mean, that might be something that comes up, but, at this point, there's,
And
we do what we
actually,
can.
Vehicles are cheap compared to people, so. And they enable people to get their jobs done efficiently, which
Yeah.
is important, so. Anyway, thank you.
Sorry, Brad.
That's fine, I actually had time to formulate more questions. So I'm bumping a question to the top of my list here, back to Mike. So in getting, I appreciate you wanting hard numbers, and I know you did, I see you didn't mention comps tonight. Comps we've looked at for a long time. Those are, it's, each community is so different, it's hard to, I'm not sure how much benefit there is from comps, but again, that's a source of some numbers. But I was just, thinking of what metrics we could use, and again, this came up with Town Hall 1, with the reorg over there. For your list, Mike, you might want to think about adding a category of new work, but I think there's also a category of tasks, and again, I raised that issue with the administration. There might be some tasks that have people put just enough time toward it to keep it from, to stay away from failure, that we're perhaps giving short shrift to some aspects of the organization. So you might want to say, maybe we have this, and again, this position is specifically on something that you felt like they've been given short shrift for a long time now, so you might want to break that up into.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's new applications that come into town, or some estimate of work that has increased.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
We're not been getting that.
Or doing better
Or,
with
yeah,
the existing.
or being ignored, or
Right,
whatever.
right. So the other question that came up, so if the administration was supporting a 20-hour position, that's still a benefited position, right? So, and I'll look to town hall, as far as benefits is concerned, what are the difference in benefits between a full-time and a 20-hour? Do you happen to know, Frank?
They qualify, they certainly qualify.
You have to be
Healthcare.
19 or under to have no class,
Yeah.
Right.
Right, so,
19.
but are any of the benefits prorated for it being,
No.
Only the retirement benefit. Health benefits, you either qualify or you don't.
okay. So the fact that,
Health benefits, you earn it, you qualify or you're not.
okay,
Retirement benefits are according to the percentage of your salary
Sure.
and the garnish of your pay.
sure,
I think I'm correct on that. But
Okay.
the point is, what you're driving at is with a half-time position significantly lessen the burden, I think. Well, some for sure.
but it's not significant, but 20 hours is not significantly cheaper than 40 hours, health insurance alone.
That's half the salary.
Yeah.
But health insurance, okay,
We're a 35-hour position.
exactly, okay. And then the last question, so we don't really have an answer this evening about, do we want to maintain services, or do we want to be managing FDP to, that's kind of an issue that needs to be talked about in the kickoff summit with all concerned parties. I mean, we could take a stand this evening for working purposes, but,
I think what I'm hearing is it would be good to have the conversation with rec and planning, at least in terms of the Ways and Means Committee as to what the correct approach is, because we certainly want to be consistent across both the departments.
But there's a long-term, I mean, Burlington as an ongoing endeavor. I mean, you've got, I mean, part of the summit is how are things looking next year, the year after, and, I mean, I think we all see turbulence, so, but maybe given that locally, perhaps locally, the growth is outweighing any of the turbulence, that we're seeing. So that's not me to decide, and I don't know if that's for the 8 of us to decide, but,
Frank's been unusually quiet.
There's a lot to say here.
Sorry, Frank, is the mic close enough to you?
I
Not-
don't know, to be honest with you.
It
Well,
may
these
be
two don't feedback on each other, do they?
No, no.
Okay.
It's pretty good anyway, but.
First of all, to the chairs, is it true, as Roger was suggesting, that in the macroscopic checklist of all the things that have been requested, that we are within overall guideline with all of these additions? Is that a true statement? Do we know
Probably need a
that?
final word from Nicole or John, but
I mean, we've got admin, rec, planning. I don't know if there's any in DPW or
I
not.
think this is in the scorecard, if
The
that's what you're
scorecard,
asking.
yeah, does the
Right.
scorecard include all these
yes.
Yes.
requests for additions? And that with that count up, we just make guideline. The school department's over a little, but they're gonna scrub their own numbers, right? They're over.
Right.
All right, so,
My understanding was that the town administration took out some money from their existing budget to get us to that.
yeah, I mean, to the point that somebody big, there are only so many apples in a pound, and you're moving them around here. All right, so that's answers that. Another thing I want to just do sort of a gut check on here, the way we're balancing this budget and the 23 and 4, the next two budgets, right, 3 and 4, is with the remainder of the federal grant, $500,000 each year, right? So 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when we do a budget, we really have to do the makeup of that $500,000 in those budgets. And regardless of, upside development and whatnot, the revenue might be there through the taxable base that we've got, but you still have to have the tax. So the taxes are going to reflect all these incremental things we do, plus the $500,000 that we'll lose in two years, right? So you got to keep that in mind.
What's the grant, Frank?
It's
The ARPA,
we broke up
American Recovery Act.
the Recovery Act. We broke it up into pieces, and it was granted with longevity through 3 or 4 years. And so we split it up, and we took $500,000 this year, half next, and half the one after, and then it's
and then it disappears.
right? So I mean, assuming nothing else happens, which I really don't think it will, that's going to occur. So we need the revenues in order to get the taxes, and we're gonna need the taxes to pay these incremental expenses, because they are real incremental expenses, right? So that's what we're looking at here. So the other question I would ask that's I think more to the department, but to everybody, we talk about why do we need this? We wanted concrete, what are we buying here, and why do we need to buy it? And in this particular position, I think what we're saying is it's really more complete and deeper investigation and coordination of implementing special conditions and permits that have been allowed. In other words, anything that's at risk here of not complying, it's not complying because the planning board issued something and then it's not following it, right? This doesn't have anything to do with creating the special conditions or the requirements.
No. That the front end of the permitting process has always been robust in Burlington.
Right.
And it's always been busy.
So the requirements exist, and what we're worried about is, are they being followed?
What I'm admitting is that we're not doing a good enough job
Got it.
on the post-approval side of it, and with the pace and complexity of what is coming in the door, we need to do a better job if
So-
we're gonna keep this.
Not to
Engine
interrupt
running.
you, but I think we get it.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're getting the right thing here.
Okay.
So to Mike's point, what we'd really need to know is to what extent are compliance problems, non-compliance occurring, and what's the degree of we can't fix it any other way without hiring? And I can think of one instance, and I don't mean to be, inflammatory here, but we had the Marriott residence and the microwave compliance issue, right? The debacle of the century. And you could argue that that was a failure to early enough pursue the letter of the special conditions or the interpretation. The building department did what it did, the whole thing went through, right? I mean, do you think that this position would have changed that outcome up front?
Your example is not a good one for this.
Give me a good one.
I'm gonna go with her on that, not a good example.
Yeah, I know why it's not a
In
good
so
one,
many
but
ways.
I'm not so sure it isn't, actually. So just give us a couple of ideas of what non-compliance hole are we gonna plug with this that's so important we need to do it now versus maybe when we get a better handle on where we actually sit on the tax increases 1 and 2 years out, because we know they're coming, for sure.
I don't have examples of where the world fell apart, because I think we do a pretty good job of holding it together. But how we're holding it together, what we're doing, what we're sacrificing in other ways, it suffers. As all of you know, the master plan kind of got off the rails. Planning is always secondary to permitting, because permitting has timelines. That's something that we need to finish, and it needs to happen, and it was a great process, and we've come a long way, and the conversation's been wonderful. But as an example of things that drop off the to-do list because of what's in front of us, that shouldn't be dropping off the to-do list, or things like that project. In terms of oversight, there's a lot of battles I think we don't need to have. This governance by Facebook is always very difficult, as it's like the world has an opinion, and try to how to manage that through the public process and make sure we're responding correctly. Not that we're, gonna be there and this person's gonna be just responding on Facebook, but just really understanding it's so important. The communication to residents is a key piece, and to make sure someone's there to understand that oversight, but also, we have a team approach in the planning department. We all have the goal, we all do a little bit of everything, and we all have different roles. So this position has a job description in terms of where we know we are lacking in terms of the post-approval process. What we know of that's what we've already permitted, what we've permitted over the last 2 years is hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of investment into Burlington. But that also means there's a lot of development on the ground that's gonna be happening and a lot of agreements that need to be reviewed. So, I don't have good examples other than, I think the master plan's a big one as to what we're not doing well. And in terms of oversight, I could cite a couple residents that aren't super happy with us, but I also don't wanna air all our dirty laundry, in terms of what we've been able to do. And there's certain things and I think working with the building department and also working with Mark Dupel, who's doing a great job creating his department to also be a lot more interactive with the other departments. And he has a whole new staff. So I know that didn't directly answer your question, and I'm trying to find a way to answer your question. But I don't know if I can directly hit it head on.
Well, okay, so
Sean first.
I think you probably answered it as well as you can, and we could go on with this all day long. I do have some concerns about the need for doing this right now. And the incremental cost is how many thousand is it?
About 70,000.
70,000 additional.
Yeah, so I'm less than on the fence on this right now, but, thank you.
Tanya?
I just want to add too, and just so that, Frank, to go back to just the one incident of would it have changed? I mean, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong on this. At the end of the day, the inspector of buildings is the zoning authority, right?
Correct.
So if you have somebody going and saying if a project is being completed, they have to go by whatever the ruling is of the project, but if they're going in on a discrepancy of what the inspector of buildings is calling, proper zoning, they won't be able to turn that around, Kristen. That's why I'm saying I don't think that
Yes.
particular one.
That example was not,
Only because that's, just so that we're clear, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
if someone couldn't go in and say.
I'll work at a better one.
Okay, because I
Sure
just
they're
don't
out
wanna,
there.
I don't wanna confuse, I don't know how many people watch Ways and Means with us. I wanna believe
Not many.
everybody. But I just don't wanna confuse it, because the inspector of buildings at the end of the day has the authority on the zoning bylaw of what he or she would agree to. And Kristen, I'm sorry, you're kind of the, your budget it's what's triggering this particular thing, but I just feel like, in my personal opinion, and everybody has their opinion on this, I either have to understand what we're saying as a community, and that may not get this answer this budget season, but if there's no clear answer this budget season, then I know what I personally have to do this budget season on that, right? And
Right.
We're either saying as a community that we're going on a need-by-need basis and we are not fixating on FTEs, or our goal is to not put in FTEs as a community, and we're trying to meet the demands of.
We're trying to
town.
keep as level serviced as we can without,
And again, and Doug's not here and Rex's not here, but the conversation was long the other day at the subcommittee, which is why it's really just striking home to me. If it's not something that's absolutely, do or die this year, then that's not our goal. So that was our discussion. It has nothing to do with planning per se, but it is, I just, I need to go on record on that for myself anyway,
that's a fair point. That's a fair point, Roger.
I guess I got two things in different directions. One is, to Frank's point about the work, the things that aren't get done. I suspect that many of them that timing is of the essence, and timing is important. If you come back to some developer, 18 months or 2 years after they have finished their project and have moved in and moved on, it is gonna be a big inconvenience to get them and expense to get them to fix it, and you're gonna have to work really hard and swing a big club. If you can catch it while they're in the middle of things, they'll be more cooperative and it'll get it done. Another lightning rod type thing is stormwater. Everybody who hasn't executed the stormwater advice or things required by the planning board, and the neighbor gets flooded, if they don't do it in the right time, anyway, it's expense and it's horrible, and that's the kind of thing that we're gonna end up with a lot of water in Burlington, more than we already have, and it's gonna be in the wrong places. So it's something we gotta stay on top of. This kind of position, I think, could help that. I'd swing the other direction, and maybe this is you can stop me when we go off the rails too far. Level service versus FTEs. I think the definition of level service, we haven't talked enough about. My sense is that the job is getting more complex to provide the same level of service. And service is not equal to FTE. So, but we haven't really delved into what does it mean to be level serviced. You know, we're still taking the trash away. There are a couple of big things that are easy to measure by residents. There are things that are harder to measure about, you know, building in the other departments. So I don't quite know what level service means in that sense. But it'd be good to hear
Listen, if
that.
it were up to me, I wouldn't talk FTEs at all, you know, but that's not what we've been saying as a community. So I just, you know, the committee can do as it sees fit. I just want to, I want to say out loud, Kristen, forgive me, because that's the way I just can't do it knowing what I'm going to do to rec next week.
Just one final thought.
Yeah.
It's like, we do set a guideline and then we come at it. You know, we make it fit. And so, in terms of, and I guess the chips fall where they may. So, thank you.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Sonia raises a legitimate question, and it's a good one. You know, I never heard us say we're trying to keep FTs, you know, non-growing. I don't think that was ever our decision. I think we have said we want to look really hard at any FT ads, and, you know, and Mike correctly pointed out, we probably could have looked into the justification a little bit more. I think, you know, this particular one is a little challenging in that it's as Kristen pointed out, it's hard to attach, you know, here's the exact thing that didn't happen, you know, we did 20% fewer of X, because it's not that kind of position. It's more of a, you know, to use the term, it's a quality of life issue that, you know, I suppose ultimately somewhere down the line we could say 20% more people had flooded front yards because, you know, we weren't able to check it. But, you know, realistically, that's not a number where we're going to come up with. So it is a very subjective thing in this particular case, I think, to figure out what makes sense. But, you know, I think, yeah, I mean, from my point of view, if we're coming in on target overall, that's certainly one important metric. If we weren't doing that, I think we'd really want to start slashing. And are the current FTE ads in the budget the ones that we would rank order first in the lifeboat? And it's a little complicated because there are separate boards and so on. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see if, you know, if Paul were to run in here and say, I would have hired this person way before that one, you know, that would be interesting input, obviously. I haven't directly heard that, but maybe he's on his way. You know, so.
His new meeting to Zoom.
So I'd like to believe that if the administration really thought they had much stronger FTE ads than the independent boards are putting up in the overall budget, that they would raise a hand and raise that as a discussion point. And, you know, maybe that's something we should explicitly ask them. But I'm operating under the assumption that, you know, Paul's not a shy guy. And
Here's John.
To that
we would have heard.
To that point, though, you know, John was left scrambling at the end because of the cuts that they made on the town side to accommodate these budgets that came in from both rec and from planning. So there is some, you know, cuts that they had to take, and that means opportunity costs for them to, you know, and so they take one for the team.
And that's fair, and I think putting, you know, as we had discussed, maybe, you know, if they were in the guideline setting, that would probably be beneficial to make sure everyone's on board, so to speak.
I think going forward, that's got to be an important part of it, because it's unfair for one side of the, you know, equation to have to take those cuts. I think all the representative boards that have an input should be there. Chris, I do see your hand.
Mute.
But you're on, you need to unmute.
Still.
We still can't hear you.
Can't hear.
Can he hear us?
Is there anything turned up, needs to be
can
turned up,
hear.
volume up over there?
I can
I
check.
don't think we've heard anybody.
No, but
We've heard Ed.
Oh, yeah, we sorry, we heard
Everybody
Ed,
else
yeah.
on voting.
Ed, we heard.
Yeah, sorry.
sorry.
Maybe his computer's on mute. No?
So you're not on mute?
Can I make a quick comment as he's figuring this out?
Yeah.
Sure.
I just want to emphasize that there are, as I'm really talking about this position and talking about the whole of the planning department, what we lose is the ability to do things we really want to do. I mean, we've moved this life science train forward and it's been really successful, but it's been really hard. And we have to look every day at what are we not going to do today to do this thing now, because it's the time, and thank God we did it before COVID. But our ability to plan and put things in front of town meeting and plan for the future doesn't have a timeline. And it doesn't have things we have to react to. And what we really lose if we're completely overcome with a lot of just permitting activities, which happens when we get busy, and we totally understand it. But what you'll see is a pattern coming to town meeting. What our ability to recognize goals and make those important changes in our regulatory platforms is really difficult when we don't have the right of services to be able to balance permitting with planning. So, I mean, I think that's the real story of where things start to fall out when we're unable to fulfill certain aspects of the department. So I just wanted to, it's always the big loser. I mean, in Burlington, we've been busy and it's been great, but I think planning is a real big part of what gets us forward, especially what even got us to this point today. So just want to make that point.
Chris, can we try again?
Can you hear me myself?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So 2 questions. What's the difference between an assistant planner and a planning assistant?
The planning assistant is kind of the administrative personnel plus. So administrative person, but also is undertaking specific planning tasks for the department.
Yeah, because I was just trying to look on the American Planning Association Mass Chapter and trying to compare qualifications to the job qualifications that are listed there and just seeing how they match up and what other districts are looking for.
Yeah, so they're planning, I think it probably is closest to Planner 1, but also adding a lot of administrative tasks. And I appreciate you looking on American Planning Association website. I was the Mass Chapter president for 2 years.
And that was, you said 2 questions, so you're good? Okay. Brad?
So I have a question, I'm sorry, Kristen, but I have a quick question for Mike and a question for Frank. Mike, as far as FTE count, are you fine if with the added positions, we still meet guideline? How much you concerned about future cost?
I am concerned, and I've been frustrated that, for years, people come before us and they ask for positions, and they may need those positions, but we haven't explained to them that we need information behind that. It's, I don't know, it just seems like a thing that, if someone needs a position, they should be able to document that need. And it may be hard to figure that out, but it should be figure-outable.
It's how do you apply metrics to the position and justify the change in the metrics over a period of time? And it's hard to provide prescriptive guidance for these types of positions because we don't have all the insight as to what this position would do, and there's more qualitative aspects to it than quantitative.
Maybe there is qualitative, maybe it's subjective, but if there's a kind of a written argument that I can look at, then that would help me. But I feel like I'm not getting anything.
Almost as if you need the opportunity cost of what we would be missing if we didn't hire at this particular junction in time.
And if you roll this question out of order and redirect to planning, I understand why. Frank, to you on the OPEB stuff, actuaries are really smart. Actuaries are really good.
That's what they say anyway.
My friend, the actuary, swears that he's much smarter than I am. Do they model FTE buildup as part of their OPEB calculations?
Build up, I would say no.
Well, they're not assuming level FTEs for all time.
No, but it's, they model salary buildup, and that can come in many forms.
I don't think they,
But on the current set of positions, they don't do any, because if
I
they
don't
said,
recall that in the tables,
No, I
to
don't-
answer you.
I don't think they project future hires.
Hires,
Sorry, I'm
right.
jumping in here, but.
And I'm not sure it's, I mean, I guess we need to consider it in the scope of, do we really need this position or not, right? As opposed to actuarially.
Yeah,
I mean,
There is a footnote that says, we don't do this.
yeah. I know of no tables that do projections of hiring by year or anything in there.
okay.
But to that point, I mean, we all know what the burden is of an FTE in terms of benefits. And that is a complicated calculation because typically the burden doesn't show up till the out years, so it has to all be actuarially mapped out. But in any event, no.
Okay. Okay. So just, I'm, yeah, Sonia's dilemma, I guess, is all of our dilemmas. So how do we as a committee, do we take it, I mean, we technically can't, we're cheating a bit by doing this on planning board's time, but I kind of feel like the committee needs to have that conversation. Do we add that as an agenda item for next week, or?
We had added it for this week, and we can continue to this discussion and ask Kristen to come back on our on a future night to do the vote at a later point in time. But
Yeah,
we
we can
could
put
have
our
that
vote in.
discussion tonight.
But if Rex's coming in next week, I mean, there's a time element to
Well,
this
we
as
can-
well.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, if you want to move rec out, I mean, I certainly don't want to move everybody's when they want to vote, but I can tell you pretty comfortably that's where I stand. I don't know that there's a strong enough argument for me to go against the conversations, points Frank has made, or just in general of points on the FTE. And again, the discussion, and it's not fair that it's in front of the planning discussion, but again, the discussion of, what are we doing as a community? Are we raising and appropriating based, are we tasking the assessors and the selectmen to tax based on what we're voting on because we want to continue to increase and continue to provide, or are we trying to stay at a certain thing? And that's what we're really taxed with as we're going into town meeting, so I don't know, I'll leave it to your discretion on what you want to do with this particular budget. I would also ask just for clarification at some point as we go in, because a couple of people have said it, can a union position stay empty? Because I don't know the answer to that, and Rec believed no, because we asked a similar question. So can you leave a line item that has an empty position that's a union position and
Pretty sure
not
we
fill it?
I know we've done it for A&P, but I don't know about unions. Like, I mean,
There have been positions
have?
left open in
Yeah.
DPW.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because,
Can I suggest,
okay, so
Sorry.
then, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
when is my turn?
I'm-
go ahead, Roger.
I'm just going to suggest, I would appreciate before we decide on this particular position, I would appreciate hearing about the rec and any other new positions, and I would appreciate hearing what the town had to give up in order to make it fit in the guideline.
So why don't we
I
do
don't know how to
this?
schedule that, but
I
that's what
can,
I'd like to
I
hear.
can take the action to follow up with that and have the town come and discuss the stuff that they gave up out of their budget, and also get the information from the rec and figure out how to do the planning. It's clear that I think we should look at these as a sum as rather than separately, so that way we can apply a consistent, figure out what that consistent method is and apply it correctly. What we're really trying to do as a community.
I think that would be very helpful, because I think otherwise what would the consequence that we're doing here, the unintended consequence, is you will by default start pitting departments against each other.
Which I don't want to do,
You know,
because.
and that's not right. I don't mean that against you. I'm just saying you will by default say, well, I really felt like X department needed that, but I don't really feel like Y department. You know what I mean? I think if we
Right.
just at least have the conversation, it doesn't mean that everybody's gonna agree on how you make those votes, but at least we know, are we talking about need or are we talking about counts? Because if we're talking about need,
Then it's a different kind of vote.
then it's a different kind of a
So-
vote for me,
Yeah.
quite frankly.
Do
You
you
know.
want a motion to table?
I'll take a motion to, Kristen,
Can I
and
just
then.
make, just, I appreciate
go
that,
ahead.
Matt.
Yeah,
But
now's
can I
the
just
time.
make one observational request that I would ask for consideration? Is that there's all the departments under the administration, and they can shuffle, they can organize, there's new positions added, they move things around, they reclass. I mean, other than the union's obviously negotiated, but for those of us, and Recreation, Board of Health, for those of us that are the separate departments, we can't do that. So it's always gonna be a request amongst our own budget and ourselves, you know, so.
You're not wrong about that, Kristen.
I just wanted to be recognized, because there's opportunities that exist in schools and in administration that don't necessarily exist in our departments. And, you know, we've asked for one position in almost 30 years, and that was in 2010, and we're asking for a second one. And not to say, I completely understand, and I think you should think about FTEs, but just look at the structure in which I'm here as a department that's under, a single department under the planning department that I can't negotiate with other ones and try to trade and balance or come in evenly. As I mentioned, like if I came in with building, we could have probably balanced and come out with something in between, but I can't because I'm an independent department. So the ability for me to kind of trade doesn't exist.
I hear you. That's exactly what
that's
Rex
all.
said. That's
Right.
exactly
Yeah.
what
So
Recreation
it's like-
said. So,
There's a couple of ways we can deal
Yeah.
with that going
Okay.
into the process, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I know Rex.
no,
Rec
Rex said
and-
the same thing.
Board of Health,
The
yeah.
library's behind you, Board of Health, you know what I
Right.
mean? So
It's our night, I know. We're the outliers here.
yeah.
Right.
So I want to make a motion to table till we can try to get more information through administration and whatever else you could provide. And I'll make the observation that the building department could provide some coverage here with resources on that end, and that is under the town administrator's control. So there may be some possibilities to get you some of the help you need, but it's not what you want, we understand that. And I'm not hung up on FTEs. Right now, what I'm hung up on is the need great enough to do this at this point in the revenue picture? And that's where we just don't know. None of us really know. So we're balancing a budget on a tightrope here, and that's my problem, and I think we should table it, see what else comes in, and vote it in a fuller context.
I'd second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
You have to roll.
I see all hands. Jaya, call on Jaya. I see everybody's hands but Jaya. Okay. So I will take an action item to get the administration and the rec, and
Yeah.
I'll work with Sonia for rec.
And we need the exact number, what the budget would be if just this one thing, I mean, we're not trying to blow the budget up, okay? It's really about, I think, this single position. So we would want the with and without budget. I think it's 70,000 was a dollar figure?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we have the number in
Yeah.
there.
Well, that's including all step increases plus the 25,
No,
just
for
the
this,
small.
just this position, we need to know the
Right,
delta.
just this position is like 50, it's like almost 60, probably.
Okay,
So
so
it's not as much as that.
the vote's done?
Yes,
Yeah,
this
good.
position is 64,000.
64, yeah.
It's it's actually 63,992,
You guys have been counting pennies over there.
but sorry.
Got there $6.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you. Can I request that I appear potentially virtually if I'm coming back, just for childcare issues?
Yeah, sure.
Between planning board meetings and other meetings. So, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh, by the way, there are 8 people watching on Facebook, on BCAT through Facebook.
Are
I,
popular.
I was gonna say,
100% up from last week.
I was gonna say from a,
Nielsen ratings are up.
I was gonna say from a metrics perspective, I do meet people in the community that say, oh, I've seen you on
Thank you,
on
guys.
Ways and Means meeting. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
don't lose the faith. We just need to work it.
Thank you, Mike. I'm sorry for the delay.
Does Mike know as an audience member?
Don't panic, but there are 8 people out there watching us.
Good. Pressure's on.
Pressure's on.
So should I start with the interesting part first, that he's requesting 5 FTEs? Is this too soon?
I think Frank's got a motion then. Go ahead,
My apologies, Mr. Chairman, too soon to joke. So on Monday, John Eiler and I met with Library Director Michael Wick. This is your fifth year?
Fifth year's director,
5th year here. Time flies.
especially when 2 years are eaten up by a pandemic.
Exactly. And we also met with 2 of the library trustees, our committees, Phil Gallagher and Hyrule Gandhi, and we had a productive conversation. So there are 2 elements to, there are actually 2 budget line items tied to the library. I'll start with their initial budget first, and again, if you want to follow along, that is budget 610. So there is a small increase in salaries due to steps, and as we've repeated with all the budgets, again, no contracts have been negotiated yet, so all of the budgets are, in my opinion, artificially reduced, but their overtime line item was reported down quite a bit because of retirement of staff members who were at higher steps. There is an $11,000 increase in contracted services from greater usage of the RICO copier. I did remember Mike can talk about their brochures, but they came out nice. They do come out nice, and they also have increased funding for organizing and advertising the library's speaker series, which I highly recommend. I was attending, I was becoming a regular attendee before COVID broke out. There is an increase in $3,500 in materials and supplies for both displays and new furniture. The remaining increase is in the book and periodical purchases, and longtime members recall that there is a percentage of the library budget that's required to go toward book and periodical purchases in order to maintain membership, essentially to allow members of our library to use other libraries in the state and borrow books back and forth. And here's a subtle point. So it's required 12% goes toward that. What's nice is that the 12% this year that does indeed count against this, again, artificially reduced budget since contracts are not settled. So that's a bit of a savings in and of itself. The budget request is for $1,710,003, and that's an increase of $34,400 or 2.05%. John and I voted 2-0 to support.
Thank you. Mike,
Hi.
please introduce yourself to the Facebook audience, and and would you like to add any additional?
Sure. Well, thanks to all my fans who are watching. I'm Michael Wick. I'm the library director. I did distribute something around the tables. I'm sorry for those of you who are participating remotely that I didn't get an electronic copy. The last 2 years have been a real struggle for constant evolving and changing plans. But I wanted to highlight something that I think has been a real benefit to the town, to the community as a result of COVID. We found a new strength in programming for the library. Some of the programming that Brad mentioned, being able to transition a lot of this programming online, we thought may see a steady decrease in numbers potentially. That did follow through a little bit with children. Children get a lot of screen time. They were especially getting much more screen time than they ever did as they were being educated at home remotely. So we did see some of those numbers dip. Of course, now that we're back in person, those numbers are really going up, especially because we were leading communities in our area in terms of bringing back in-person programming for children. So there's many surrounding communities, my hometown community being one of them, that still aren't doing children's programs. So we're getting people from towns as far as Reading who are coming to our library for our programs. But for our adult programming, we found that online programming was a premium. It was something that we've been able to increase our programming over 200% attendance in the past several fiscal years. And to that point, we're actually just finalizing a bid right now. We've opened sealed bids today, and we're looking at increasing the audiovisual capabilities of the Fogelberg area, which is our programming area within the library. That's going to give us fuller capabilities to do programs in person because we really don't have any AV capabilities to speak of except for a cube speaker that we set up with a lavalier mic and a cart with a projector on it, much like you might see in a classroom setting. So this is going to increase the professionalism of our programs, but it's also going to increase the reach of our programs because we'll be able to, with a component, much like what you see from BCAT, but automated, it would be something that we could deliver hybrid programs. So people, if they didn't want to make it to the library, would still be able to partake in our programming online, which we've been doing right now, but on a lower scale. Our in-person programming has been doing great, but we found that we about double our numbers or triple our numbers when we have online programming as a component of that. Additionally, some of our programs that we've been doing are being delivered by staff who never previously delivered programs before. These are, for example, our reference librarians who typically were focused on customer service, in-person service at the desk or at the library. They're now doing programs like, I think, John, you had said that you enjoy the trivia night that we do. And that gets upwards of about 50 people who participate. Of course, more than that, because there might be multiple people who are watching at home. And then when we tried to do that in person, we had about 2 people, I think, show up. So
It's not as good.
yeah, so we're learning that, you know, there's certain ways that people want this, and so we're adapting to that. And, you know, so that is being supported by the trustees through their state aid grant funds that the trustees have in their discretionary accounts. Additionally, another aspect that we've learned, you know, all of this is convenience, really. It speaks to convenience. And when we were doing curbside library services, people were a little dismayed that we were ending it and asking people to come back into the building. I thought they might embrace it. We had some people who were upset that they couldn't come into the building, but more people were upset that we were ending curbside services. So, you know, as we started speaking to these individuals, as we were ceasing curbside services, we found that really it was a matter of convenience. People like to be able to drive through the parking lot, grab their books, and go. So I've been working with the Friends of the Library who've supported and funded purchasing a holds locker, much like what you may see in Home Depot or Amazon, where you can go up, you can scan a barcode, scan your library barcodes, use an app on your smartphone to let it know that you're there through Bluetooth, and a door pops open and your library materials are there waiting for you to pick up. So we'll be debuting that hopefully some point in April or May. Of course, as with everything, you know, this has been delayed because of supply chain problems, which translates into whatever you want it to mean, or whatever they want to use for an excuse. But you know, there's been things that we've been doing, you know, that I think that you know, as awful as the pandemic was for the country, the community, I think it's really given us an opportunity to find new strengths as a library. And so we've enjoyed, the struggle in part, and we're enjoying looking forward to the new services that we're going to be bringing.
Awesome.
Thank you. That sounds awesome, actually.
Thanks.
Any questions from the committee?
Chairman, motion to, did you have a question?
If I may, just, if you can do it briefly, because we're going long tonight.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of an online programming offering that you have that's popular with the kids? What it would be?
Well, online programs with the kids, at the beginning, we had some popular programs, but it really dwindled over time. So we had magicians. And this was, at the very beginning of the pandemic, we quickly pivoted. I think we might have been one of the first departments to start doing online programming. And so we had a magician. There were 200 people who logged in online to watch him. He was excellent, even remotely. But for kids programs, we really haven't had huge success with online programs. It's in-person programs. It's really driven the use.
How do you differentiate it from entertainment? And what makes it special from a library point of view?
So I don't think that we necessarily need to be exclusive and say that we can't have entertaining programs. There is a aspect of lifelong learning where it engages play, especially in young minds. Play is really important when it comes to establishing that space for lifelong learning as well.
Okay, that's the sort of thing I'm after.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ready to go?
All
Motion
right,
to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
thank you. Great.
You did that already.
Frank?
I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, I thought we already did the motion in the second, never mind.
No,
No, I think
I-
I-
Sonia
No,
did a
stop.
motion, and then Frank asked a question.
I have
Do it,
started.
Roger.
Sorry, proceed.
Frank?
Aye.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris? I lip read that. Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. That's 11-0. So now we have facilities.
Which I had already forgotten about. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the library occupancy numbers in a separate facilities budget. These numbers, I don't believe they're in the budget book. Did you find them?
It's interesting. When I printed out what I had on the town network, it didn't come with that as well. So I don't know if it was something that wasn't
So
stitched
it
together.
is on the website. I'm not sure if it's in the actual budget book, but it's three line items.
Check.
What budget number is it, Brad?
192.
192.
192, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't find it, but just the breakdown is heat is 19,988, electricity 76,175, telephone is 2,000, and again, all of these numbers come from the DPW superintendent. That comes to a total of $98,163. That's an increase of $2,220 over last year, or an increase of 2.31%. Again, none of that's really in Mike's hands, but those are the numbers, and the subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
So just to clarify, that's facilities relative to what?
Library,
Just the
Library.
library?
just the library.
Right. So we had broken up that budget years ago.
Yeah, I remember for the offset to something or other.
Right, so because
Purchasing.
the book purchasing is based on the total
Yeah.
budget of the library, and by removing this, we decouple that
And
cost.
it's not cheating. Different towns do their budgets differently. Some had occupancy in, some had occupancy out. We just thought it would be a fair thing to do to pull.
Frank?
I have a generic question, Mr. Chairman. I meant to ask when John and Paul were here, but on occupancy across the board, which really encompasses fuel, electricity, that sort of stuff, right? And that's buried in everybody's budget. But it seems like the increases that are being proposed for occupancy are nominal, yet fuel is going through the roof. And I'm just wondering if we're setting ourselves up for an occupancy slaughter by about, a factor of 2 of the actual cost for that piece of it. I just wonder about that.
Yeah, I think
We might want to
we should,
check on that.
yeah, these budgets were put together before the situation in
Yeah,
Ukraine
yeah.
occurred.
So the big ones, like, Public Works would be a big one, obviously, right?
Right.
And schools too. Heat.
Yeah.
And I just don't know. I mean, it seems to me that we would be looking at least a 30% increase potentially in the fuel and electricity charges.
I think we gotta ask, but remember that all these are large organizations that get wholesale, closer to wholesale rates than the retail
Yeah, I
ones.
think we should check though, Roger. I'm a little, I wonder where that's headed.
And if I may, another
Yeah,
point
go
that I
ahead.
remember from years past is the price of gasoline, which actually is not in this facilities budget. They always estimate it like 30% higher than it is today.
Well, that may be the answer.
So there's a lot of headroom in the gasoline price
Not
that
the
they.
free
that they
cash
budget.
generator, but,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. I know it's a sidebar, but we should.
No, it's a legitimate concern because of all the recent tension. Roger?
And a follow-up question, actually, I'm sorry I didn't ask this before, but since you reminded me about the size of the book budget and that the facilities wasn't in it, and your earlier comment that said that the current budget does not include cost of living increase, if they come back and look later when the cost of living increase is included in the budget, will they call foul?
No, No, they
promise
won't.
Not to, huh?
no,
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I don't
we're-
need to dig, I just,
we're good,
okay,
yeah.
thank you.
It just seems strange that we can get away with this, but,
Probably can't do it every year.
Yeah, I mean, next year the negotiated
catch up.
contracts increase will be a part of it, so yeah. Yeah, the budget will already be larger by this and, next year.
you'll see a smaller increase this year just because the steps are there, but
Yeah,
the cost of living will get hit next year.
yeah, I think it's pretty common across the board because, union negotiations can begin in a certain year and then end in another year and they have to back pay. So it's not factored in by the Mass Board of Library Commissioners when we're providing our budget numbers.
Actually, I guess, how many times a year do you have to certify that you're within compliance?
Just the one time.
And what time of year is that?
So let's see, we do 2 different reports. So one of them is in July, and that's our statistics report, and then the financial report is in September. So we'll be doing ours for the previous fiscal year in September of this year. So we'll be doing FY '22 in September of this year. So it's retroactive.
All right, yeah. A lot of lag there, but okay.
Thanks. Any further questions?
Move to
Chair will-
approve?
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Frank?
Aye.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yeah.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. 11-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for.
Good night. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and we have 2 smaller budgets, 113 and 119.
Yes, 113.
Yeah, what's 113?
I'm looking it up. 113 is town meeting and reports.
Oh, right.
It's like,
The Town Hall 1?
It is, no.
I thought
Dave
it
was
was,
not here. I don't think Town Hall 2 even took it up.
Town Hall
I think,
2.
I think regardless of which committee it belongs to.
this is a pretty easy one,
This is a
right?
pretty-
Zero?
We
This
never
is a
have much to
level
s-
end-
we never have much to say
level funded
about it.
budget. It's a grand total of $15,908. There's part-time salaries of $3,333, and then contracted services for $12,575. And the major driver of this budget is just basically making sure that we have town meetings 3 times a year.
I'm going out on a limb and saying motion to approve.
Seriously?
Second.
Okay.
Wow.
What
Awesome.
subcommittee was supposed to take it?
What's that?
Were David and I supposed to do that one?
Generally, I think Town Hall 1 takes it.
I think it is Town Hall 1.
Yeah, I think we screwed up. Okay, it's good that you take it now.
Honestly, it's straightforward every year.
The next budget, it will be a little bit less straightforward because there's a major budget bump in it, but
I
I can, go ahead,
I feel
John.
obligated to ask a question. What are the contracted services?
For town meeting,
For town meeting,
Yeah.
so,
probably the printing.
and the constable
Okay.
and all of that,
Okay, good.
yeah.
But there's no backup on it.
We can elect to postpone it to another meeting if you would like to make the motion, Roger.
No, we already moved and
Okay.
approved, or seconded.
All right, any questions on the phone? No. Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Okay, Sonia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yeah.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And chair votes aye, 11-0.
Steve, if I may, next week Whitney will be here to, Town Hall 2 is not going to take a position on the sealer of weights and measures budget, so Whitney will be here to walk us through that. Perhaps she can walk us through this budget as well if there is a continued interest.
Sure.
Which budget?
The one
The
we
one
just
we just
voted.
did.
Oh,
Sure. With new information, we could reconsider.
Could change everything.
You're gonna use every line in Robert's rules before we're done.
Yeah, we could elect to have, no town meeting next year. That would be great. All right. So,
We already tried that with nominations.
well, my,
that's not up to us.
no, I understood. My son keeps lobbying me to not budget, fund the school department, but I keep telling him we're mandated to. In any case, the next one is Budget Buster. It's basically the combined legislative committees. The overall budget presented increase requested is 37.42%. But this is largely driven from the fact that there were a couple of new committees that asked for, what are those things called? Recording clerks,
Second land use.
ISAC and land use, so that was a
Making
3,000.
ways and means look bad.
Right?
I'm sorry about that. Generally, I think the two committees got $1,500 each, which generally, I don't know if they will use the entire allotment of that. And I think yeah, so that's basically the major driver of that
We
budget.
did do that one, Steve.
Oh, and the town moderators, oh, you did?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
go,
so you-
then
you did
please give a
fine
report.
job. Yeah, so the subcommittee voted 2-0 in favor. There is a couple of $1,000 increase. As you know, we passed a warrant article at town meeting to allow land use to have a recording secretary. We forgot at the time to actually appropriate money, but I mentioned it on the floor, and John Denizio just shoved it into here. And there was a minor decrease from ZBRC, the zoning board of whatever, which is a town meeting subcommittee, and we added ISAC in, which actually is not a subcommittee, I do not believe, of town meeting. Am I right?
It is under the select board.
Yeah, but we put that in here,
Yeah.
just to get them all in one place. So it's not a trivial amount of money, but it's small, and they're all within scope of the kinds of hours that, as everyone knows, the recording secretary typically attends the meeting, gets the notes, writes the minutes, and they also assist sometimes the chairs in distribution of materials and gets the proper reports turned into the clerk's office. So that's the job, and we approved it 2-0.
And then the town moderator's budget of $150 comes out of this line
Oh,
as
yes,
well.
you're right. You're right. That's it.
Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Great. Frank?
What?
Your vote?
Oh, yeah.
You're losing credibility, Frank.
I'm pulling a Doug. Yes.
I have to ask, it's a roll call. Sorry, it's a roll call vote. Until everybody's here, I have to roll call. Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Sonia?
Yes.
Mike? Roger?
Snoring.
Chris? Ed? Jaya?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, 11-0. That brings us to the end of this meeting.
Did you want to recap?
Oh, yes, we do, actually. So, well, Phil's not here to make a motion to adjourn, so we have plenty of time for a 5-minute recap for the open meeting.
Excellent. The other week, Lisa Mead, Town Council, gave a review of open meeting laws and a bunch of related things. Roger was there also, so he can fill in the gaps that I have here. So I'm just gonna, I think the intent of, the requirement is that that presentation has to be done and there has to be a representative of each committee, and I think the intent is that we'll bring back the highlights at least, and everyone will be slightly more compliant with the law, hopefully. So with the open meeting law, this is enforced by the Mass Attorney General. It applies to any multi-member committee or subcommittee if they were appointed by a public committee or public official. It does not apply if you're on a committee that was appointed by town administration, interestingly. So in general, you need to post a meeting if deliberations are going to be done and a quorum is involved. And so definition of quorum includes even if it was done serially. So if Steve were to talk to each of us in turn, 14 days in a row, that would still count as a quorum if he was trying to get an opinion on the same thing from each thing. And this applies whether it was done in person, by email, or whatever, which is why Steve keeps beating us down when we try to have a discussion in email. It doesn't apply if the purpose of the communication is just for distributing material or scheduling a meeting. So that's completely legitimate to do. Non-deliberations don't count. And this could include things like with the planning board doing site inspections as long as they promise not to deliberate while they're doing it, social gatherings, if a board's attending town meeting, that also does not require them to post it. And then in the highly confusing category, if you have a quorum of your board at another board's meeting, it technically doesn't count, except that it always seems to whenever they rule on it. In general, if you truly don't discuss anything unless it was already voted on by your committee in this other committee's meeting, it technically would not be required to be posted. But it does seem like in every example that Lisa Mead brought up, they seem to say it was a violation, even if it didn't appear to you. So the moral of that story is if we're meeting jointly with another committee, we should really post that to be on the safe side. So the requirement for postings is to post 48 hours in advance, and you can only count business days. So holidays and weekends don't count towards that. You can post the agenda, and if previously unknown items come up, it can be adjusted all the way up until the meeting, actually. But you have to be careful about this kind of thing. In general, saying I forgot is never a good reason for anything. In particular, and just operationally, if you need something posted, if you need to get it in by 3 p.m. to the town clerk in order to get it posted that day.
But not Friday,
But not Friday,
They
yes.
go home at noon.
Thank you, yes.
But does that day count on the 48-hour posting?
Yeah, it's only posted when town clerk actually posts it. It doesn't count as posted just because you sent it to town clerk. That sort of falls in the, if a tree falls in the forest category. So the agenda needs to be reasonably specific. So in particular, the agenda item of new business or old business doesn't really cut it as being sufficient. Shout out to the select board, I just noticed that was on their agenda. One exception to the 48-hour rule is if there's a true emergency, like, everyone in town got COVID, some natural disaster, the internet's blowing up, we need to allocate money to solve it. Those are legitimate disasters. Again, I forgot is not a disaster, that's a mistake. But anyway, those are exceptions to the 48-hour rule. Okay, going into hybrid and remote meetings.
John, if I
Yes.
could, just a few comments. Yeah, Frank, to the point about when you send it in, it doesn't, I've had the panicked, 48 hours plus 5 minutes. If you, the town clerk's office just in the last year or so to use the clerk's people more efficiently, they tend to wait till the end of the day and read through and post everything. So if you call it 48 hours plus 5 minutes and you sound really panicked, they will stamp the posting for you. So.
Sounds like he's speaking from experience.
Not that would ever happen.
Just last week.
I
My-
don't
my
think you're
problem-
supposed to admit that on an open mic.
My
It was
problem,
in, it was posted on
It
time.
was in 48 hours, right?
And we also had an occasion with our meetings where, we, after the fact, adding people, post it to a certain location, and it actually happened for tomorrow's meeting, added a WebEx feature to it to update the posting. So the original posting was in, but we updated the posting with adding the WebEx.
And that's a completely legitimate refinement of new information came in.
And we also, I erroneously had the wrong location on one of the postings, and again, they allowed us to change that as long as we had a pointer from the wrong room to the correct room. So I've messed up lots of ways, but it's all worked out.
the one
And again, if you mess up anything, it's a $1,000 fine, and we've not been fined yet, so there you go.
I've missed posting announcements due to the fact that, I remembered 30 minutes before, but I was in the wrong time zone, so in fact, I missed it by 3.5 hours, but that's another story.
Okay, related to this are remote and hybrid meetings. So as you've noted, a roll call is needed if any members are not in person.
My apologies in advance.
If there are video or audio recordings being made, that's something that the chair should announce. So now there's the normal time rules and the COVID rules. The normal time rules are that a member can be remote only if the chair agrees it's unreasonably difficult for that member to attend. And only the in-person attendees would count towards quorum. So for instance, there could be 100 people there, but it's only a number of people in this room that would count towards quorum normally. Now, the special COVID exception rules, which currently are going to expire July 15th, so we only get to do this a little bit more, is that the hybrid and remote attendance is allowed for any reason whatsoever, but I'll highlight it's not required to have hybrid or remote meetings at this point. If you want to force everyone to be in person, you could. And you can be remote for any reason whatsoever. And all members, regardless of whether remote or in person, would count towards quorum under the special exception rules. Okay, so now we get into public participation, which is the next topic. So there's at least two kinds of meetings. There's public meetings and public hearings. And at least in terms of what was spoken about, in a public meeting, public participation is not required. So for instance, while we have public time in our meeting here, that's not actually a requirement. But if we do have it, it's important that the chair doesn't attempt to regulate content in any way. So they can set time limits on, you can speak for 5 minutes or whatever, and enforce that, but you can't say, I don't like your position, you're cut off.
I have a question on that.
Just to finish the sentence, you can cut off people if they're actively defaming someone or inciting illegal behavior. So we haven't had that issue yet.
So this moderating of content, the school committee often will say if it's on the agenda, wait, is that an acceptable moderation?
Yes, that's definitely, yes. Yes, as perqueries will say that the public participation is for things not on the agenda already and have them wait.
So this public participation, that sounds like open mic time. They can ask and talk about anything they want.
Within the time limit, I suppose if they were truly giving a magic act, you could cut them off. I think it has to at least be germane to what the committee is responsible for. I think that would be reasonable to say.
They can't bring in their guitar.
Yes.
No, but someone could come in and ask us about the trash collection.
Yep.
Yes, to the extent that it has to do with the budget, they could, yeah.
It might be broader than that. I mean, I think
Yeah,
to
it
some
sounds like
degree,
it
the chair gets to set the rules.
Yeah.
But they have to be, fair and equitable, and you have to let the person talk for some minimal amount of time, and then you can say.
As long as he let both the pro and con garbage people talk, that would be a fair discussion. He couldn't just allow one side of it, I think is the more important issue.
And by the way, that Ways and Means domain is very broad.
Yeah, I mean, that really does sound like open mic time to me.
Well, as,
We appreciate the fact that people who have taken advantage of public participation have been on topic.
as the chair has pointed out, we look forward to the day where this becomes an issue.
That's right. I was just about to say that.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for. I think you just made a big invitation.
This is why I asked him to do it at the end of the meeting.
So, the other part,
This was supposed to be 5 minutes, wasn't it?
if you guys would just listen, the other type is the public hearing, and in this case, you must allow public participation. So, as far as I can tell, as far as this goes, that's the big difference there. Okay, minutes. That was another exciting topic. The key point is that it's meant to be a summary, not a transcript, so don't feel like you have to write down everything everyone said. You need to have, if there are exhibits that were used, you need to include a list of the exhibits in the minutes. The actual exhibits don't have to be included. Those just need to be filed if you have an office with the office, or in our case, send it to the town clerk and she'll figure out where to put it,
The records officer?
for example.
The
Yes,
archivist.
I'm sorry, the records officer, who happens to be the town clerk. All right, the votes, if they are a roll call, you have to actually list who voted which way.
By name?
I think you're allowed to say unanimous if it turns out that way.
But if it's,
But yes, if it's not unanimous, you have to say who voted which way.
really?
All right, these are two things I need to take care of.
If it's not a roll call, you can just give a count, though.
Today, we've been unanimous.
I'm sorry?
Today, everything's been unanimous.
No, I mean, because it's a hybrid, right? That means it would be.
That
because
forced
it's a
the roll
call.
That's the roll
Then
call.
I have to enumerate all the votes, which I did.
You can give a count if it's unanimous, though.
Oh, all right, so 11-0.
Yeah.
John, so a subcommittee meeting, there are two of us. We don't do roll calls, we just vote. If it's a one favor, one against,
You have to say
who? Who voted favor and who voted against?
Yeah, well, no, let me take that back. Because you don't have to do a roll call vote because it's in person.
Right.
You can just give a count.
Oh, okay, 1-1-0.
So it's only if you had to do a roll call.
Okay.
But
thank
yeah,
you.
if David were on WebEx and you were in person, then you would have to.
Got it,
roll.
okay,
Exactly.
thank you. I got enough trouble with these minutes.
Yeah, that big committee.
You write very good minutes, Frank.
She did highlight that you're allowed to vote on the minutes even if you weren't there. It's not a requirement that you abstain.
Everybody should pay attention to that one.
It's up to
Don't
you.
need to be in a meeting to vote on the minutes.
It's entirely up to you if you want to abstain.
But you can also turn in draft minutes.
Yes.
It's actually in the bylaws that you have to file the minutes within 30 days. I actually looked that up, I didn't believe it. It's true. If there's,
And I have to give the town clerk's office credit, they have in recent years, phone calls,
Yeah, they're helpful.
reminders for subcommittee chairs who've been late on their minutes.
Not that you've experienced that
not an
firsthand.
issue here, though. If
Oh,
multiple,
good.
if multiple committees are in the meeting, only the hosting committee needs to file the minutes. All right, almost done here. Public records, just be aware that any email or other electronic or paper document related to town business is a public record. So, whether you send it from your personal email or anything else, someone could, request that document, and you'll be required to produce it if it's actually town business. Two exceptions are if it's a security-related issue, including ISAC type things, or if it's not a final policy document for a policy that's still under development. However, once it becomes final, then the drafts become public records at that point. Okay, and conflict of interest law is the final topic. I'll summarize this as don't accept anything worth more than $50 in value, even if it's spread over many small donations. You can't get someone to give you $51 bills 1 week at a time. It's all added up. You get a note from the town clerk about conflict of interest, so take the training if you haven't. Excuse me. And the final point is be aware that as members, we're officially municipal employees for purposes of the conflict of interest law, but not for OPEB. So that's everything.
Mr. Frank Monaco.
One question, minutes, and we bring documents to meetings, like handouts, the town administrator might give us something. Oftentimes the treasurer will give us backup stuff that's not handed out to anybody around health insurance. Are we obligated to attach all that stuff to them? I know it's a public record.
So they don't
Do we
need,
have to submit it?
they would need to be, as I understand it, it would need, and by the way, it's obvious I'm not a lawyer. It would, I think it would be required to be listed as an exhibit in the minutes. You wouldn't actually attach to the minutes. But those handouts should be filed with the records officer as an exhibit associated
At the
with
clerk's office?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you list it as something that was distributed, you have, in your minutes, if you list the things that are distributed, if you have a reason to believe that they will be available, then you probably don't need to attach it and try to handle that
Yes,
distribution.
for instance, if John Denizio hands us something, I think it's sufficient to list it as an exhibit that, he gave us an FTE chart, and then, if someone says you need to produce that exhibit, they can get it from him.
They probably could. I mean,
We don't have to.
this does come up, okay?
Yeah.
Sometimes what David or I will do is ask John, is it okay if we have you send that information to all the Ways and Means? He wouldn't necessarily be doing that, and that's our way of getting it wider. But I don't attach it and send it to the clerk. I don't worry about whether he's kept it somewhere forever or not. He typically does, because he's really good at this, but
I think it's
not
sufficient to
formalized.
count on him to maintain the record since he generated it.
Yeah.
I think it would be more of an issue if if a private citizen, gave some document, we should probably make sure that gets filed.
Yeah, but it's attachments to the minutes that bother me the most, because that's really awkward.
Again, you don't have to attach to the minutes, you just need the list of
Indicate,
things
okay.
attached to the minutes.
I think this is an area where we've been kind of lax over the years.
Yeah.
We can do
I
better.
was- I'm panicking now.
Don't look back.
So John, when we met with Mike, he was he'd already, he printed out a copy of the library budget for each of us and passed it around, but it's already public record.
Yes.
That's not an issue, yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's,
do you need an explicit line, or maybe that's something to be added to the minutes, maybe a documents line, and just cite the
Well, it's the
the
purpose of the
chapter in the
meeting.
budget book.
Purpose of the meeting is to review the budget, obviously the budget, the document, and the documents on the website. I don't think that's an issue at all.
You just listed, like, reference.
This is
FY
backup
23
stuff,
budget.
auxiliary information.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably to be official, you would say FY '23 budget document.
Dated 3/22, whatever,
Yeah.
Oh, for example, yeah.
because they do make changes to them.
Thank you.
Did I get it all, Roger?
And then some.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention, I think you actually did, that Amy sends out reminders of people who have, I think every 2 years you actually have to fill out a form that you
See a
have
conflict.
taken
Conflict of
the
interest.
conflict of interest law. I don't know if they do that with an open meeting law.
Yeah, maybe
refresher.
mixed in there or something.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Amy reminds people, and there's something you have to do every couple of years. Of course, we have to do that for work too, you know. Anyway.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So, before we do that,
I guess not, Mike.
I know we're.
Tough meeting to
We'll wrap it up. Clearly, I have a little bit of homework to do, and I will follow up on that with the town administration and the two departments involved. From a programming perspective, next week, I have going with the high school band department to New York City and watching my son and all the other tributes play at Carnegie Hall. So that should be, that should be fun, and we're going to go to see a Broadway play and to a concert and see Chelsea Market and hopefully Central Park, so it should be fun. Mr. Boxbaum says we'll be back by 4:30 next week. Knowing Mr. Boxbaum, I don't necessarily trust his time estimates, so if I'm not here, Mr. Eiler here will run the meeting. Even if I am here, he'll probably run the meeting anyways. But I will work on the other issues in the meantime.
Thank you.
Roger, you said something?
No, actually, I didn't.
Oh, it was Mike, sorry.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was gonna say, welcome Megan.
Thank you.
Glad you could join us.
Thank you. I'm
Interesting
excited to
first
be here.
They're not always this exciting.
Good night, everyone.